Hi, welcome to episode 3 of Mortal Musings. I'm your host and commentator, John Waite. These are the chronicles of my thoughts and feelings as I battle an aggressive form of cancer known as renal transitional cell carcinoma. For those of you who've been following along, you may notice a slight change in my appearance as I've actually trimmed my beard. I assure you this was done more for comfort than for appearance because I am truly one of the least vain people you'll ever meet. In fact, I have to force myself to look at myself in the mirror in the morning to brush my teeth and comb my hair, and I assure you I rarely check during the day. And I'm very confident that my disdain for my personal appearance has cost me dearly over my life, both personally and professionally, but that's another story for another day and not for today's topic. Throughout my life, there have been 3 constructs that have really had a huge impact on me and have helped me through the many dark periods of my life. They are the constructs of perspective, hope, and faith. And over the course of these chronicles, I'll be talking about them a lot. But I can honestly say that there's one construct that has never been a part of my life. It's not something that has ever had an impact on me, and that is fear. And that is what I want to talk to you about today. Fear. Fear has never been part of my life. I'm not going to pretend that I'm the most macho man or anything like that. I have my own share of phobias. I'm a little bit scared of heights. I'm a little claustrophobic. But I can honestly say neither have really impacted my life in any way, shape, or form. I love to fly. And I'm in a profession as in the golf course industry. There's not many times we have to deal with tight spaces, so those little phobias don't hurt me. And I can honestly say I don't have any big fears. I've never had to deal with it about anything, whether it's fear of animals or being mugged or certainly not dying. And part of that is because I never ever thought about dying. Ever. Yeah, it's just not something I think. I've been in denial of that concept all my life. Intellectually, I know we're going to die, and I'm probably going to die. But I've denied that it's ever going to happen anytime soon. And I still, today, in denial. I still don't believe I'm going to die. This isn't going to beat me. But now I've suddenly become aware that whether I want it to or not, that concept of fear is there, and it's within me. Now, my background actually is in psychology. When I went to the University of Kansas, I got my master's degree in psychology and was well on my way to my PhD. In fact, I was all but dissertation when I took the sudden and very unexpected right turn into in the business world. A whole other long story. But anyway, psychology has never left me. I love psychology, and I'm sure that the principles and stuff that I learned as an academician have helped me in the professional world, especially in the marketing world. So I am familiar with the concepts of repressed feelings. I know a lot about it from an intellectual standpoint. I've studied them, etc., but I've never actually dealt with them personally. You know, it's always been an abstract concept. But now I'm finding out that fear not only can be manifest consciously, but it most definitely can be manifested subconsciously. And that's what I want to talk to you about a little bit today. Yesterday, I told you a little bit about the panic attacks that I started experiencing this summer. These things were very scary, and they happened at night when I'd lay down. And they usually were triggered by a stray thought. Oftentimes, these thoughts may have had to deal with the subject of death or some personal tragedy. Now, my wife, bless her heart, she loves Criminal Minds and she loves all these murder mystery shows. And these shows are very creative in showing how people can die in various horrible ways. But that's never bothered me in my life. It never, ever bothered. I mean, watch those shows all the time. Scary movie, no, nothing. But for some reason this summer it was different, because all of a sudden I would start thinking about personalizing it. What if something happened to me like that? Like being, I think the one that first started it was being buried alive. That triggered some real base emotions. And all of a sudden at night, I was having this physiological reaction to where I couldn't sit still, I couldn't lie still, I couldn't sleep, and I had to get up, and the body got restless, and yada, 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 and it was horrible. It was the most horrible thing I'd experienced that I had gone through that didn't involve pain. I mean, I just couldn't control it. I lost complete control of my body and my mind, and that was very frightening to me. But especially because it was over something that has never bothered me before. I remember another instance where I had gone to a doctor and he said something about your one rear end accident from being permanently paralyzed from the neck down. I've heard that before. I've intellectually known that before. I've got a bad neck and all of that. But for some reason that night when I laid down, that thought popped into my mind. Oh my God, paralyzed from the neck down. That thought was scarier to me than any thought of dying, because it was more real, I think. And I couldn't imagine that. And again, it triggered this physiological response in me that I was totally unprepared for, because I had no way of battling. I didn't know what to do. I would take the Ambien, I'd take the other medications, and it wouldn't stop. And then these panic attacks happened so frequently that I started getting scared, panicky about having a panic attack because they were so frightening. I'd go to bed dreading going to bed at night because I didn't want to have another one of these episodes. Now, they eventually faded away. The insomnia didn't fade away, but the panic attacks thankfully did. But throughout this process, when I was having these physiological panic attacks, I always attributed it to somehow being a physiological event, not a psychological one. Because I'd never dealt with anything consciously about this fear. It's not something I dwelled on ever in my life. So why now? So I was attributing it to some body chemistry thing that was going on that was related to the blood in the urine and all the other things. And I've kept that belief that this was more of a physiological thing than a mental thing until last week. Prior to last Thursday, which is a week ago today, these panic attacks only happen at night, only when I was laying down, usually first thing when I laid down to go to sleep. Well, after the TV was shut off, because my wife loves watching TV at night. That's when they would occur. But last week, something happened to me that made me realize that something much deeper was going on. And in fact, I believe it was a classic example of a repressed feelings that I had that were manifesting themselves in these panic attacks. What happened was, I was scheduled to have a contrast CT scan on Thursday. Then Wednesday afternoon, when I was in my other doctor's office waiting to have my blood pressure taken to get clearance to have laser surgery on my eye, the Emory called and said, I'm scheduled for a PET scan the next day, not a contrast CT scan. Now, I know about PET scans. It's a comprehensive scan of your body to find out if the cancer is spread. And I always figured I'd probably have one. But for some reason, hearing it kind of made me shiver a little bit. And of course, I had my blood pressure taken out within 5 minutes of hearing that, so my blood pressure kind of was very high. So I ended up getting blood pressure medicine as a result. But at any rate, again, yeah, I didn't really pay much attention to it. Then on Thursday, I went in for the actual PET scan. Now, I'm pretty much a veteran to CT scans. I've probably had at least a half dozen just in the last 3 or 4 months alone, and over the last year I've probably had closer to a dozen with all my neck and back and issues. And going back in history, I've had the long tube MRIs done on my brain where I was in the tube for 45 minutes with my claustrophobia. But I was able to cope with that. I was able to self-hypnotize myself, and I didn't have a bad time. So the idea of being in a scanner should not be frightening to me. I've been in them a lot. But when I went in for that PET scan, I sat down on the scanner table, I had a panic attack. This was the first time I had one in daylight and in public, right in front of the technicians. I said, "I'm sorry, I got to get up. I got to move around." And I did. They were very nice, and I moved around for about 3 or 4 minutes, calmed myself down, and then we started the scan. And this machine, it's not that scary. It's about half the size tube-wise of the old MRIs, and it's much wider, so it's not like it's pushing me against my shoulders like the MRI tubes did. So there's really no reason for me to be claustrophobic. But they put me in the machine, and the way the PET scan works is they do the regular CT scan, which doesn't take but 4 or 5 minutes, and then they do the PET scan, which is the second machine, and that takes a lot longer. When they started, they start the PET scan down at the bottom, which means my head was now merged on the other end of the scanner, and I had a second panic attack right there in the scanner. Now, fortunately, I didn't move, but I shouted, and bless her heart, the technician came in, and she literally had to stay with me for the rest of the scan. She was there holding my hand and my arm. Well, she wouldn't hold my hand because they had to keep everything still. But she touched me and held me and reassured me. And this really freaked me out because, again, I've never had that happen. I've never had to have somebody comfort me like that. That happens to other people, not me. And to have this kind of reaction to something that's routine for me just blew me away. And so upon reflection, I realized what really was going on. What was going on was I was dealing with not the scan, the process. That wasn't what was bothering me. It's what it meant that was bothering me. It was the confrontation with the fact that my doctor was very concerned about the spread of this cancer throughout my body. Now, and again, intellectually, I already knew that possibility was very real. I mean, I was already technically stage 4 because we already knew it spread to the lymph nodes. So the fact that it may be in other parts of my body, really, it doesn't impact a lot because the treatment would still be the same. It's still going to be the same chemo and everything else. Now, technically, it may reduce the likelihood of surgery as an option. That's always a consideration to remove the kidney and lymph nodes. That kidney's apparently not working now anyway because I don't think that kidney's worked since the end of July when I stopped having the blood in the urine. So again, I don't think it's the intellectual part or the concept, but somewhere deep down that touched a nerve that this was real, that the cancer might be spreading all over my body, and this is something that I can't control. And I realized that this is something that why I deny it on a conscious level. I still deny it. I still don't think about the spread of the cancer. I don't really think about dying, certainly. But my subconscious certainly is. It is, I think, perhaps more aware than I am of what it's fighting. And because I have not dealt with it openly before, I was repressing these fears. I was keeping them contained within me, and they needed a release. They had to come out. And so that's where these panic attacks were coming from, is that I had this fear within me that I was not recognizing, that I was not dealing with on a conscious level. But they're still there. It's still there. And when you repress these fears, it comes out in various different ways, whether it be anxiety or, in my case, it was these panic attacks. And now that I know what's going on, I haven't had any more panic attacks because I realize that it's just a confrontation of these fears, that it's not the thing that I'm thinking about that I'm fearing. It's this whole process that I'm going through that, and I really think part of the biggest fear is not knowing. You don't know you really don't know what the future lies. And perhaps even more importantly, you have no control over it. And that, for me, I'm somebody who's always been very proud of self-control and things of that nature. And to be battling something like this, that it's an unknown enemy, it's something that I had no background to cope with. So why am I so focused on this today? Well, because tomorrow I go in and find out the results on that PET scan. So I will be dealing with the knowing and know exactly where this cancer is in my body tomorrow. And I must admit, I'm certainly nervous and anxious about finding out the results. Again, consciously, intellectually, I know it's not going to make that big a difference, but it might. And so it helps to talk about it. And I think that's the point that I want to make today, is that whether you want to recognize these fears or not, if you're like me and you tend to deny that bad things are going to happen, but all of a sudden you find out that in fact they might, you need to let these emotions out, because they're not going to go away. They don't disappear. They become repressed, and they will come out. And if you don't work with them, they're going to come out in ways that you may not want, or may certainly be destructive, not beneficial. So whether you want to admit it consciously to yourself or not, talk to people, whether it be a loved one or a family friend. Perhaps a therapist would be best, counselor, preacher, hey, or even a camera. It doesn't matter. The important thing is to talk it out, to deal with it out in the open, so at least you know what you're fighting and know what really is churning inside that mind of yours that you're not always consciously aware of, yet it's still impacting you. So anyway, I'll let you guys go, and wish me luck tomorrow. I'll let you know what they tell me. So thanks for tuning in.